Hello everyone, Brother Al McClaney with this week's stewardship video. And as always, before we go too far, here's the disclaimer. No advice should be seen as a recommendation or endorsement, as I'm not a licensed financial advisor. This is for educational purposes only. You want to do your own research. So this week's video is inspired by a battery light that came on uh, in my Kia. So I have a Kia Soul 2010, and the battery light came on, and that's dreaded because normally it's not the battery. That doesn't mean the battery's not being charged by the alternator. And sure enough, I took it to a place, which I'm not going to name this place, but I did get the Kia Soul um, estimate of how much it was going to be to replace the alternator. So you can see here, hopefully you can see my cursor, they quoted me $1,158 to replace the alternator. And they also said, oh, you probably want to do the battery also. So that includes that as well. Well, what immediately came to my mind was a scripture passage that Jesus said to the disciples. And in your own personal Bible study, I encourage you to go back and read all of John 6. And this is specifically after uh, Jesus had done a miracle in feeding the thousands. And I can't remember if this was the 4,000 or the 5,000, but we know it's in the thousands. And afterwards, he said this, and this is from the Message Bible, and this is John 6, verses 12 and 13. For the Message Bible says, when the people had eaten their fill, he said, meaning Jesus, he said to his disciples, gather the leftovers so nothing is wasted. They went to work and filled 12 large baskets with leftovers from the 5 barley loaves. Now, this is what has always intrigued me about this particular passage. Jesus, this is the creator of the universe. This is the Lord Almighty, all power. He could easily manifest as much over and over and over again, but yet he stated to the disciples, gather the leftovers so nothing is wasted. So Jesus is a good steward. He practices good stewardship. And here's, I mean, this is the creator saying this. So what that said to me is even though me and Janine have an emergency fund and we have the $1,158, at least that much in the emergency fund that we could immediately tap into. What this was telling me from this passage is I need to be a good steward. I need to not just take this estimate. And Dave Ramsey talks about getting at least 3 estimates. So what I did do, I went to 2 other mechanic places that we use also, and you can see here's the estimate of the second place that we use. Half the amount, $527.25 was the estimate for the alternator. Now they're not quoting the battery, which would only been still a couple of hundred more dollars, but still, this is half, almost half the amount of the first estimate. So still doing additional good stewardship. And I didn't put the estimate because this person texted to me the other mechanic that we use. It ended up being the total amount was $460. So 3 estimates, later was more than half the amount savings from being a good steward and remembering that scripture that Jesus has said, let nothing go to waste. And so I thought about Matthew 10, verse 16, New King James Version says, behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Now, the backdrop of this is talking about us as disciples going out into the world and being aware, meaning that we need to be aware of the world. We need to be aware of the schemes that are going on, but we need to be shrewd ourselves, but not in a way that's unethical. In other words, not when he says not be harmless as dove. So in this case, I'm talking about in the area of stewardship, being shrewd, right? Being smart. And recognize that this is God's resources. So I need to be a good manager for God's resources. In fact, if you look at Proverbs 31, verses 16 and 18, we always talk about it, or the women love to quote the scripture, the Proverbs 31 woman. Well, if you read it through, men, Proverbs 31 is a great business and stewardship application. In fact, Let's read here from the Amplify. It says she considers a field before she buys or accepts it, expanding her businesses prudently. With her profits, she plants fruitful vines in her vineyard. She equips herself with strength, spiritual, mental, and physical fitness for her God given tasks and makes her arms strong. She sees that her gain is good. So we need to be good business people, good stewards when it comes to God's resources that He has, and that's the lesson I learned here. Take my time, be prudent. Even though we had me and Virginia had the emergency fund that we could have paid that, but what did we do? Prudent, got three estimates, and now the amount was over half or less than half the amount that was first quoted to me. So going with prudence over convenience. And I quoted Dave Ramsey, and there's a great resource out there about tips to stay for spending control, how to change spending habits, to be these different articles out here. If you just go out to ramsolutions.com and then there's a search bar, and I just did search under spending. And as I quoted, it was Dave Ramsey who says, when you have um, a item you need to spend on, get three estimates, especially if service is big, ready, get three estimates at least. So with that, let's go change gears, take a look at the earnings that are happening this week. One just jumps out for me is Tesla. Tesla is going to be reporting Wednesday. Tesla's been in the news about deliveries not happening, the incentive being taken away because of the bill that was passed in Congress and the president signed. So it's going to be interesting to see what not only is the earnings, but what's the forward-looking forecast? What are they saying about deliveries? Now, the thing to remember, Tesla has other revenue coming in. It's an AI company also. So it's going to be interesting to look at it play. But this week, all types of companies, but I'm just particularly paying attention, of course, Tesla, uh, because I actually have some positions in Tesla. Again, not a recommendation. Others that are reporting, because this market is going to move. You got Coca-Cola, you got Lockheed Martin. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. That's a defense play, meaning defense stocks. DR Horton, that's going to give us insight on what's going on in the housing industry. Texas Instrument, that's local, but that's technology. We've got GE, Verna. We've got Tesla, of course, Alphabet, which is Google, right? IBM, Chipotle in the area of when it comes to servicing and food, General Dynamics, that's defense and technology, American Airlines. So all this week, it's just loaded with Fortune 500 companies and a good diverse slate of companies reporting. Because remember, we're going to be paying attention not only to the earnings, but also to the forward-looking forecast. And the forward-looking forecast is going to be interesting because it's going to give us some insight. Are these companies going to be, because we got August 1st approaching. That's when a lot of the tariffs supposedly are going into effect. If he doesn't taco, which is Trump always chickens out, we'll see what happens because the forward-looking forecast from these companies will also let us know, okay, are we going to absorb a lot of the tariffs? Or are we going to be passing it on to the consumer? Right? Because if you have robust earnings, you may be able to play that and balance that a little bit and not pass as much on to the consumer. Well, why would you say, well, Al, they're a company, why wouldn't they pay it up, pass it on? Because that could affect your volume in sales, right? So it's going to be interesting coming up. So a couple of stories that could give ideas for you to think about. Again, do your own research. One is Trump passed the bill, or he signed a bill called the Genius Act, which is a total just tremendous amount of legislation in the area of cryptocurrency. And the idea that the president says, we're going to make, you know, the U.S. crypto capital of the world, crypto planet. So could be some ideas here. Then here's another one. There's a company called MP Material. I forget what the P stands for, but it's a rare earth minerals company, which right now China has like um, a monopoly on rare earth. Well, this company signed a deal with the Defense Department, and Apple when it comes to rare earth. So it's one of the few U.S. companies that has rare earth. So could be a investment opportunity. So let's look at the first one when we talked about cryptocurrency. Well, Coinbase is an obvious choice. You can go out on market analysis or stock analysis, put in the stock symbol coin. It's kind of rich in per share, $419.78. But remember, Fidelity, you can probably buy it as a slice or go to Charles Schwab where you could just do it by dollar amount. Well, Coinbase, that gives you exposure without having actually Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever coin of choice you have, because this is the platform to trade it, right? So that could be an ID there. The other is there are some exchange traded funds that give exposure. It's not a direct purchase of Bitcoin. And by the way, you can, I mean, me and Janine own some Bitcoin, yeah, a little bit. It's not a huge part of portfolio, but just some little exposure. We also have some exposure through exchange traded funds. There's one called Ethereum exchange traded fund. There's a Bitcoin exchange traded fund. So look at those, do your research. Now, the other one, rare earth. This is where I'm talking about the Materials Corporation. So I don't know if that P stands for anything. Anyway, but MP is the symbol, Materials Corporation. This is a rare earth mineral mining company, one of the few in the United States. And right now it's trading at $63.22. Go out on stock analysis, see if you want to own some shares in this. Again, not a recommendation. Then the other one, I saw this on CNBC, uh, a company called Ramco, symbols METC. This is actually a coal mining company that now has a rare minerals mine. And right now they're only trading at $22.42. And their plan is to get involved in this rare minerals mine. In fact, this was the video. There's a video out in CNBC when I actually saw the CEO when he did this video, and he was talking about them getting into rare earth mines. So METC could be, do your own research. As we always do, we close out. We're looking at overall market. Here's QQQ just going. I mean, the market's shaking off everything. Inflation is shaking off that there's not going to probably be a rate cut in July. I mean, it's just going, right? Which is concerning because this could mean it's winding up like a snake, just getting ready to strike either higher or lower, right? When all this builds up like this. Same thing with SPY. All right. So right now for your 401ks, your retirement accounts, if you have individual stocks, you're probably happy right now. But as always, want to be cautious. So with that, that's this week's stewardship video. Hopefully, you were inspired. I know for me, great lesson learned about taking my time and being prudent, getting estimates. But at the same time, you might have heard me say, we have an emergency fund, and that's a biblical principle. So we did have it. We didn't have to put it on the credit card, and that's important. But at the same time, we want to be prudent, as Jesus was talking about in John. Don't let anything go to waste. And with that, that's this week's stewardship video. As my pastor Denny Dwight Davis says, keep a good spirit, have a yabba dabba good time. And as we say in the stewardship at the end of the stewardship video, remember Jesus is Lord, therefore he's the owner, but we're the faithful stewards following his principles of his resources that he's blessed us with. We'll see you next week.